Hi, my name is Tyler, and I recently inherited this abandoned Victorian house. I'm sitting on my staircase, and I kind of just wanted to tell you how I got the house. So let's put you back for a second. Sorry if there's any noise in the background. My neighbors are out doing, living their life, and I can get mad at them about that. So let me set you down on something. My name is Tyler, and I am the owner of this American 4-square house that was built in 1899. I'm located in St. Louis, Missouri, and this house is built of St. Louis red brick. I'm going to strip the paint off of that soon before we put the new long porch up. I'm trying to do a long porch that would have been historically accurate or semi-historically accurate to the original porch. This house was one of the few buildings or few houses on the street that did not have a brick and or stone porch. So we're playing a guessing game with trying to figure out what it looked like. I became the owner of this property last year when we discovered that someone broke into this house. I guess I should really start the story a little bit further back. My grandparents bought this house in 1962, and from then until the 90s they owned the property. After in the 90s my grandmother died, and so the house was transferred to my father and two of his youngest sisters. So they owned the property for a little bit. And then when my father married my mom, I guess my aunts gave the house to my father. It was a agreement. I think I'm gonna close that door, but I think my lighting's gonna change if I close the door, so we shall see. So I left the door cracked because this house is north facing, so it really does not get a lot of sunlight. So if I close the door all the way, we won't have any light. We're gonna try to deal with the noise. I'm gonna make this a lot faster as well. So I spent most of my childhood in this house. I am intimately familiar with this house. And I think that's the reason why I wanted to take on a project as big as this one. I know that a lot of people would not take on this project. And the only reason I feel so strongly about it is because I have personal attachment to this house. Not only is it my grandparents' house, not only is it the house that I grew up in, but it's one of the last physical things I have left of my father. He passed away back in 2014, and so since then the house has sat vacant. We didn't know what to do with this house because even before he passed away the house needed repairs, just not as drastically as you see now, but it's a lot to fix when it's a lot to fix. In 2008 is when we left the house, like me, my mom, my little brother. We left the house because we found lead in the house. It had killed two of our dogs. And my brother was still small enough where he could be gnawing on things that he shouldn't gnaw on. So we wanted to make sure he was in a safe environment. My father decided to stay over here and continue to fix on things. We got an apartment a couple of blocks away, which is where I currently stay now. His intention was always for us to move back into this house. But what also happened in 2008 was the recession. He lost his job, and for a while it was really hard for him to find work. And once he did find work, I was going to college. Every year after he passed away, we came over here and we cleaned the house. As in, we cleaned the surrounding area. We always paid for people to cut the grass and stuff like that. The house was vacant, but it still had a lot of furniture and stuff in here. It still had all of his personal effects. My mother wasn't ready to clean out the house because, when you lose someone, getting rid of their stuff is like the last thing you do. And when you do get rid of it, it's almost like they're really gone. And so she fought very hard against us to clean out this house when he first passed away. So it remained a time capsule up until last year. When we would come over here, we would clean up the front yard, we'd walk through the property. We did that during the springtime. So as soon as the snow would start melting, we would come over and clean up everything in the back. Because this is a vacant house, people started dumping in our backyard. And so we have to constantly keep that clean as well because we didn't want to be cited by the city. We were never neglectful owners. There were things in the house that probably should have been fixed when you noticed them, but I can't speak on why you didn't fix it. I was a kid. I came over here in 2019. We did our big cleanup. All was good. Then 2020 happened, and you know what happened in 2020. So we didn't come over that year because we were following the stay-at-home order. We really did take it to heart because my mother is a cancer survivor, and so we didn't want any extra stuff going on. So we stayed in house as much as possible. When we came over in 2021, boy, did we get a rude awakening. Not only had the front porch collapsed, like it looks bad now, but it looked worse last year. But that had completely collapsed and separated from the house. And then you go around back, and the back porch was like super loose. And then you also notice that the brickwork on the back of the house, it had started collapsing. And so we went over here thinking, oh, we're just gonna come over and clean. And we were like, our minds are blown. We got the brick guy to come out and look at my bricks to see if he can fix it. While he was out here, we realized that someone had broken into the house. And that's when everything really just hit the fan. And we had never experienced any type of break-ins. Like, crap happens in a neighborhood, but like this house being broken into, never. So that was a wake-up call, and that was the deciding factor of what to do with the house. Because we had got the brick guy over here just to see what he can do so that the house wouldn't collapse and hit any other property or a person. Me and my mother decided that it would be best if I took on the house. And it would have been something my father wanted, because he wanted not only for us to return back to this house, but he wanted to keep this house in the family. The reason why this house in this area fell into as much disrepair as it did was because of policies as well as racism. While I was editing this video, I realized that I rambled a little bit when I talked about redlining, but it's just because I'm really passionate about this problem. More so because people think it was an issue of the past and that it does not affect our current living situations, and you're dead wrong. If I'm losing people in this video, it is okay, because this is a truth that needs to kind of be spoken about a lot more. St. Louis is a really good example of redlining and what it can do to the neighborhood. But St. Louis is not the end-all be-all to redlining. We're just a very good case study. But whenever you see entire neighborhoods that are just gone, they're blighted and stuff like that, it was never individual people by that point. It was more so city planning that happened to them. If an area just had one bad homeowner, or even just a handful of bad homeowners, the area wouldn't look the way these areas do. And on top of that, the city would have got rid of those bad owners. Whenever you see areas that were redlined, they look like they are in war zones. That's city planning, and you can't get around that. You can be like, well, people could have did this and people could have did that. And then I think it's because a lot of us don't realize what redlining was and how it was enforced, that we kind of forget that you can't do things. It's just like trying to budget your way out of financial woes when the real issue is that you're not making enough money. So what happened with redlining? Redlining is the process of systematically denying people access to financial institutions. The basic form of it is mortgages, because that controlled where you lived, and where you lived in the United States controlled the type of schools you went to and all other type of stuff. Redlining also affected the banking system. So if you lived in an area that was redlined, you may not be able to get a bank account, which is crazy. But that also explains why if you go into areas that were redlined, you typically see a lot of same-day cashback kind of places and stuff like that, check cashing places, or a lot of pawn shops and stuff like that, is because people didn't have access to regular financial institutions, so therefore they did whatever they could to get money. But the reason why our house looks the way it does is because when they bought this house in 1962, not only were we the first black people to own a house, because up until then it had been completely illegal to sell this house to anyone of color. As soon as they bought it, the area was redlined. And it was by design. I'm not saying everyone who moved was racist, because they weren't. Some people were literally just moving because their jobs moved. But that's the thing. When black people start moving to these neighborhoods, people who were prejudiced and people who owned property, like big property, not just housing, but businesses, they moved as well, because they did not want to be around us. And so it caused an issue with the jobs that were available to black people. It caused an issue with the actual institutions they could use. So thankfully, again, my grandparents bought the house and they were able to pay off their mortgage. They never had to refinance. But that being said, after the loan was paid off for this house, they were denied every single loan they ever tried to take out in order to fix up this house. Because by the time they got this house, it was in need of repair. I know that based off what we can see around the house, the last structural changes that happened to this house happened in the 1910s. And today we still have fixtures from the 1950s in this house. So I know that like nothing big ever changed in this house. And they simply were just trying to mend a very old house by the time they bought it. And they could, the big structural changes that I'm having to make right now, they couldn't afford it. And so they tried to do what anyone who owns property would do, which was pull equity from the house. And not only were they denied the equity, they were denied personal loans as well. And then over time, the property values of the house kept going down and down. And so like you didn't have the actual equity to pull from. And that's something that I encountered, and that's what made me learn more about redlining, because I was like, oh, this house is paid off. I know it's not worth a whole bunch of money now, but I should be able to pull some type of equity from it so I can get some of the basic, bigger things fixed. Not a chance. In fact, the property values over here are so low now that you can't even put a mortgage on these homes. Most places require a $100,000 kind of price range for a mortgage. Some places will do $50,000. Most of these houses don't even qualify for that. In fact, my house, the one we're in right now, according to the city, is worth the exact same amount as a completely burned down house 4 houses down. In the time of this being filmed, I just met with Spire and they're gonna connect my gas and stuff back up. Like the fact that I can do all this, and to the city, this house is worth the exact same amount as a house that's completely burned down. It shows you just how far everything was devalued. And that's kind of what I just want to talk about, because when people see neighborhoods that look like this, they just assume it was because of bad homeowner. And if you have one house that looks like a complete wreck, yeah, that's probably a bad homeowner. But when you have hundreds of houses at a time or entire streets and stuff like that gone, it was not bad homeowners. It was city planning and the fact that they were denied access to so many things that over time, the people who did want to fix up these homes could not, so they moved on. And I think that's why it's so important for us to have people who move into these homes and have the money and the will to fix them, because there's plenty of people who have the money to fix them, but they don't value the areas, so they don't value the property, and they don't want to invest in it. I have personal ties to this home, and that's why I'm working so hard to fix it up and get it to where I want it to be, with the hopes of that once my property values go up as I'm doing work, it raises the property values for the houses around me and allow other people to actually buy into these houses. Because that's the other issue. The property values are so low that you cannot buy property over here. Like, not buy it with a loan so that you can also fix it. So what you do is you have people who don't have a whole bunch of money buying a house that needs a whole bunch of fixing, and then they can't, or it takes them decades to do it. Going slow and steady could win the race, but when you're doing major work like this, anything can happen that stops it. Like with my father, for example, he was trying to fix this house so that we can all come back. And during the years that he had it where he was trying to fix it, the 2008 recession hit. I ended up having to go off to college, and he got cancer and died. Like, it's important for people to realize that these houses in these areas have value if we make them have value again. So back to the other parts of the story. In June of 2020, I had a mason come and reconstruct the back wall of the house. He also did general tuck pointing of the house. He basically tore down the brick wall and then rebuilt it using the exact same brick, as well as some masonry blocks that you see in the photos. It took 5 days for him and his crew to complete the job, and after he was done, my uncle decided to tackle my backyard and clean it, but it's an invasive vine and it has returned. In July, my uncle and I fixed the porch so that we could get inside the house. It was a temporary fix to the problem, but it allowed us to do what we needed to do. I didn't film a lot of stuff when we got into the house because we were so shocked by all the damage. When fall came, the projects had to stop. Hey, it's Tyler. I am at my apartment right now. The month of June chose violence. This whole month has been horrible for me in my personal life. Like, it's a lot going on, and yes, I do know that I'm like this right now. I'm about to shower and then do my hair because I got some really exciting news today. But let's start with the June stuff. June has just been awful, and it's so weird because June's my birthday month, so I'm always really excited about June normally. I normally take a couple of days off for my birthday. Even if I don't do anything, I just want to have a day where I can relax and, you know, be thankful that I'm here. But June chose violence. This whole month has been horrible. And then yesterday, which was like June the 9th, I got a phone call from the roofing company I'm going to use. We had originally scheduled for my roof to be done at the end of the month, which would have been around my birthday. And I had time off already, so that would have worked out just fine. They called me and told me that they're going to start on my roof on Monday, which would be like June the 13th. And I'm like, what? So I had a mini heart attack just trying to figure out how to deal with all that, because even if I did push back the installation date, they would have still dropped the material at my house, at a vacant house, a very vacant house. And I was just trying to figure out how to do that, but my boss, being awesome as she is, she managed a way to get me to be off that day so that I can be able to everything go as it needs to be. They can start working that day. It's going to be awesome. I woke up and I was intending to work on my business stuff. I recently did some product photography and I wanted to edit the photos and then update them to my website. June had other plans. I decided to go ahead and just call the company that I ordered my custom door through, not because I'm fancy, but because my house was built in the 1800s, and apparently when it came to like service areas, it was like, yeah, I don't need regular sized doors and stuff. Yeah, I can stoop. So I had to get a custom door made for the basement. That finally came. So I'm so very excited because the goal for this year was to get the house closed and dried, meaning that everything can lock and be secured, and that I have no more water coming down into the house destroying all this original woodwork and other stuff. I can get all that done this week. I am so freaking excited. Everything is coming together. Something nice is happening in June. And then the roof project started. And everything that kind of could go wrong went wrong. Starting off with the fact that was the original roof up there. Like, there had been some patching over the years, but they found complete slate up there. It became a lot more expensive than we originally planned, and a lot more manpower was needed. Also, none of my chimneys were closed, so I had about 5 open chimneys. Also, I kind of just want to point out how large my windows are, especially when you see 2 grown men standing next to one of them. After 5 days of sweating in 103-degree weather, the roof was finally done, and I loved it. I chose green because I wanted it to stand out. Now I just need to get gutters and a new porch, but I couldn't afford the gutters at the time that we did the roof. Take a tour of the house in the next episode. This house was built in 1899, or better said, this house was completed in 1899.